I'm afraid you have to let him go, Clarice. She heard the words and closed her eyes. There were so many arguments she could bring forth, she knew, but right now none of them came to mind. Captain Holm was right, at least in the strict sense. Only that knowledge didn't do anything about the nagging feeling in the back of her mind, the screaming voice that told her that she had caught a real monster this time. It was just that she hadn't been able to prove it. He hasn't said anything about wanting to go free, and he hasn't even demanded a lawyer yet, she replied, bringing forth the probably weakest argument. Her captain's eyes narrowed. I know, Clarice. I know. But that's not the point, is it? We're already in hot water with the arrest, and keeping him here any longer will make it worse. For the record, I'm on your side, but I also need to protect the precinct and everyone around here. If the press gets a hold of what you've been doing, they'll have a field day with it. And even the calmest people, like Father Kagan, might turn around and sue us. That's not something we can risk now, Clarice. Let him go. Apologize. Make sure he won't take any legal action against us. That's an order. His calm demeanor made the words even worse. There was no shouting, no anger in his expression. All she could see was an old man tired of the games. And not for the first time, Clarice thought that it might be time for the captain to retire. Outwardly, she sighed and shook her head. There were quite a few biting remarks she could come up with, but she settled on one of the less brutal ones. If it was any other victim and any other perp, we'd have them cuffed in the basement already. What is it about homeless people that makes you pull the media card every time? She could see the shock, the anger flashing in his face before he got himself under control again quickly. The captain didn't say anything else, just slowly shook his head while he pointed at the door. It's gonna take me half an hour to apologize properly and everything. That's okay, right? Clarice didn't wait for an answer, just turned around and headed for the door. This whole situation was fucked up, and now she was sure there would be no help coming from above. Which just meant she would have to talk to her colleagues. Maybe pull some favors. She just knew she was right this time, and would prove it. Hardly anyone looked up as she passed them on her way to the interrogation room. It wasn't like this was a new thing, or even especially memorable for them. Most of her colleagues were helping with a different kind of problem. A missing juvenile boy. William Holt, 15 years old, disappeared on his way to his friends in the affluent part of a neighborhood. The only reason she wasn't on that case as well was the guy in the interrogation room. Clarice didn't mind that she didn't get any help. The last thing she needed was someone else butting in as well. She had enough trouble dealing with the captain and his overbearing caution. After turning down a hallway once again, the door to the interrogation room came into view, and Clarice felt the temperature around her dropping. This might be her last chance, she knew. One last attempt to get this piece of shit to confess. So he could be locked up and they could throw away the key. This monster didn't deserve to walk the streets. She took a deep breath as she stopped directly in front of the door and tried to calm herself down. Showing any sign of aggression could destroy everything, she told herself again. What she needed right now was to be calm, relaxed, in control. But her hand was shaking as she lifted it up, and she felt cold sweat running down her back. Maybe this was above her pay grade. Clarice felt the doubts again. What if this creep walked free because of her? If she didn't manage to nail him down now, he would be far more careful, at least for a time. Wouldn't it be her fault then, if someone else disappeared? Clarice took another deep breath and told herself to calm down. Letting her thoughts spiral like that was no help at all. She needed to just go with the flow and nail this piece of shit to the wall. With a single motion, she opened the door and could see the man sitting at the table, not even flinching. His bald head was bowed as if he was in a prayer. With his hands in cuffs, he was sitting there, unmoving, waiting for her to reappear. Clarice could feel another chill. Normally, the people she interrogated showed at least a modicum of discomfort, but not this guy. He was in the exact same position he had been in when she left, and she was sure if she checked the camera in the corner to her right, she'd see that he hadn't moved a single muscle all the while. That was the type of guy he was. Someone who seemed strangely inhuman. She stepped into the room and looked up at the camera. The red light was still glowing. It was recording. Coupled with the smaller camera on a tripod next to the table and the microphone, anything said in here would be immediately stored in more than one place to prevent any accidents. It should fill her with confidence, Clarice knew, but right now she felt strangely underprepared and even somehow exposed. This took a bit longer than expected. I'm ever so sorry, Father Kagan. Clarice could hardly stop herself from growling those last few words, but the man sitting there showed no sign he had heard anything. He was smaller than her, older than her, frailer and probably weaker than her. Yet she couldn't help but shiver if she even thought about freeing his hands. She took another step, and the man started to move. Slowly, like a glacier, she could see his head rising. There wasn't a single bead of sweat on his bald and blotchy skin, and the eyes that now stared at her looked like they were almost black.
Officer. No. Clarice. It is all right if I call you that, yes?
She felt a sting in her chest as he said her name, then pulled out her own chair and sat down. This wasn't the time to get argumentative. I've been called worse, so go ahead, she simply replied and forced herself to smile. In front of her, still lying on the table, was the file, the one about his crimes. She was shaking her head softly as she opened it again.
So, Clarice, I guess your captain told you to set me free. Is that correct?
She gave him a cocky half-smile to cover the fact that he had already apparently seen through her, and shook her head again. Nope. The captain told me to take my time. You really don't need to worry about it. Clarice saw the dark eyes narrowing a bit. The rest of the face stayed just as placid as before. It irked her. Somehow this man seemed even less human up close, as if he was nothing more than a puppet Let's go back to our last discussion then, or do you finally want to ask for a lawyer? Now the old lips formed a slight smile, while the dark eyes still stayed trained on her. He seemed to be enjoying this, Clarice thought, and couldn't stop herself from shivering. I have never seen a lawyer make any situation better. If I need help, I shall ask for it, but not from one of you or yours. There was a cold chill in the air as he spoke, and Clarice had to force herself to smile politely. Then, let's start again. Father Kagan. First name? The smile on his lips died. No first name. I gave that away when I entered his service. Clarice pretended to make a note. And what kind of congregation did you lead? You want to be called Father, but I don't see either the name of a church or an official place of worship anywhere. She could feel the cold, dark eyes burrowing into her with even more intensity. The guy opposite her was wearing handcuffs a bit too tight for hours, who had been sitting in that uncomfortable chair without a single complaint the whole day. Got mad when someone questioned his faith. No, there isn't. He started, then seemed to calm himself down again. Then again, does an official name make your faith any more real? Can you only feel God's presence if you sit in a certain building? That sounds to me like the acts of the faithless. Don't you agree? Clarice now smirked and smiled for real. It's just bureaucracy, Father Kagan. Nothing personal. You don't have to get offended. For a split second, she could see a flash of anger on the old face. His eyes seemed to glow as his jaw clenched. She was going in the right direction. But I'm not here to debate tax law with you. That's a whole different matter you'll have to contend with later. I will make sure of that. I'm here to talk to you about the disappearance of Evelyn Green. The man across her seemed to relax at the mention of the name. His jaw unclenched and he even smiled softly. I am terribly sorry, but I don't know that name. But she does sound like a lost little lamb, doesn't she? Clarice felt the rush of anger again, but kept herself under control. A lost little lamb? That was last seen with you. Maybe this photo will help. She pulled out the mugshot of a middle-aged woman, staring into the camera with a completely blank expression. One of the homeless around here. She had a corner close by. I even talked to her a few times. And then you show up, and she disappears suddenly, leaving behind all her worldly possessions. Father Kagan smiled, openly and brightly this time as he looked at the photograph. She could almost see him, licking his lips. I think I do remember her now. Yes. He started while grinning. That poor woman was indeed a lost little lamb. She was so afraid of the world, of the people in it. Lost and confused like so many others. Poor souls, the whole lot of them. Clarice could feel her hand clenching into a fist. His voice sounded insincere, as if he was just reminiscing about something completely unimportant.
I did offer her my help. A place to stay and sleep and pray. I even went so far as to feed her, clothe her, and invite her into our place of worship. There was a glimmer in his eyes as he spoke. And then? Clarice interrupted to speed it along, and the smile on the old man's face vanished again. And then? Nothing. She was still a sinful woman at heart, Miss Clarice. You need to understand. We cannot help those who do not want to see the light. Every single one of us is a sinner through and through, even if we do not want to admit it to ourselves. God sees it all. Every wayward thought, every cruel act, even if it is only in our hearts. And sins must be cleansed, Clarice. First, they have to be admitted. Then, they need to be atoned for. This is the only way to save one's soul. It might do you good as well. Start by making a list of everything you've done. And I promise you, you will soon feel better. Clarice shook her head, then stared back at the old man sitting there, still smiling. My conscience is clear, Father Kagan. There is nothing I have to atone for. She could see a snarl coming over the face of the old man, but he kept silent. Clarice continued on. What about you, Father? You seem to notice the speck of sawdust in others' eyes, but not the log in your own. Two old hands struck the table with such force that Clarice almost fell backwards. Her fingers were on the butt of her gun before the echo of the hit stopped coming back from the wall, and she could see the old face was now a visage of pure anger. There was nothing calm about him anymore. Spittle was flying as the old man started to growl. Do not quote that fake book at me, child. You do not know your Creator. You have never seen him, spoken to him, or even felt his presence. How dare you question me, you who are the least of all the people in this city? Claire straightened up and took her hand off the gun. She could easily overpower him if he lunged for her, but with this sudden outburst he had delivered her what she had wanted. A cause to keep him here, without her captain breathing down her neck. And I guess you've done all these things. Talked to God, seen him, felt him. The man, still angry, fought to get himself under control again, but Clarice could see him struggling. Of course I have. Every second of every day. He is with me, and he guides me. Through him, everything is possible. Do not speak of matters you know nothing about. Clarice looked back and up at the corner of the room. The camera was still recording. Everything that was happening now could be used by her later. You have quite a bit of an anger problem there, Father. She started, keeping her voice as sweet and innocent as possible, just to provoke him further. Have you thought about talking to someone about that? Two dark eyes were staring daggers at her as a snarl came out of his mouth that sounded almost beast-like before he caught himself again. Righteous fury, child. He hissed through gritted teeth, then forced himself to take a breath, and suddenly seemed calm again. It is my burden to bear. I have been sent here, to this place, because it is a cesspit. God has ordered me to descend into this pit of snakes, and I shall do as he commanded, even if it is against my own wishes. Evelyn Green was a whore. Did you know that? She sold her body and stained her soul.
Clarice kept a calm expression. So you killed her? Is that right?
There it was again. That snarl. She used drugs and had stolen from her fellow man. Had lied, cheated, had wrestled with impure thoughts since before she had become an adult.
Clarice blinked and repeated the question. So you killed her to cleanse her sins? The two angry eyes softened, but just for a moment. This was it, Clarice told herself, and felt her heartbeat picking up.
It is not for me to decide who lives or dies.
The man spoke in a hushed tone, then furrowed his brow. Shit. That wasn't what she had hoped for. He hadn't confessed to the murder at all. But it is your duty to carry out what God tells you to do. The man sunk back and looked at her incredulously, as if she had asked the most mundane, stupidest question ever. His tone turned calm, and he looked at her with this strange pity in his eyes. Of course it is. It is all of our duty to follow the words of the Lord, child. Disregarding something like that is unthinkable, is it not? Clarice copied his pose and let her upper body sink back to stare at him as she answered. I would not kill an innocent person. No. The anger was back in his eyes before he even opened his mouth. If God so commanded it, it would be your duty to kill every man, woman, and child in this dreadful city. Do you not see the insanity of your words? God's law is absolute. Clarice smiled softly. Even you? If God commanded me to pull out my gun and kill you on the spot, you would have no problem with that? She could see him now following her move. Only the smile on his lips didn't reach his eyes. I would die gladly in his service. He snarled, and the grin grew wider. Maybe that is the difference between us, Clarice. You keep your eyes closed, while mine are open. You do not see God, nor do you seek him out. All you want to do is live your life according to your own whims, while I spend mine in service of him, looking for him and finding his presence everywhere. In every ray of sunshine, every bird's song, and even in the screams of the people. Clarice's eyes grew wide. She couldn't help it. That is what you wanted to hear, child. Right? The man started to list names. Evelyn Green was among them. All the other people she had in the file were named by him as well. But he didn't stop there. 3 names got added by him, 2 of which she had never heard of, and one that made her blood run cold. William Holt, the 15-year-old boy. Clarice wanted to jump up, but the man raised his hands already. God has told me about you as well. It is not too late for you, but your time is running out.
She ignored the comment as she started to lean on the table. What did you just say about their screams?
He has just told me that you truly are one of the least of us. Your sins are tainting your soul, Clarice.
She could feel the anger taking over. I don't give a shit about that stuff. Did you take the boy? There was a slight smirk on the old man's lips.
As God commanded it.
Clarice wanted to lunge at him, but kept herself back. Where is he? What did you do? She needed to tell her colleagues. They would tear this city apart to find him.
He is with the Lord now, Clarice. Free from his sins. Even though he was young, he was already far down the path to damnation. I saved his soul for him. Even someone like you would have heard the Lord's commands back then. If only I could show you what it looked like. Let you listen. You could hear it clearly down in the basement. See his face turn from the visage of a demon into that of an angel. She could see the reverie in the old man's face. He was ecstatic. They all were like that. Every single one. At first, they struggled like demons. Some of them even almost overpowered me. But once I got them, once I had them beneath me, you cannot imagine the bliss I felt with each and every one of them. The moment the devil finally took his hands off their soul, when their own arms fell, and they gave themselves over willingly. And I could hear and feel God so clearly every time. He wasn't just watching me, but looking at me with pride in his eyes. I could feel his love, and even hear his thanks when they finally exhaled their last breath. And I knew their souls were saved.
Clarice couldn't believe her ears. The guy was a complete nutjob. A serial killer.
You just confessed, you asshole.
She growled at him, but felt no elation. His eyes, still as dark as the night, looked up at her again from between his raised hands.
Your petty little electronics can do nothing against the might of God. He has told me all about it, and when you look, you too will see that there is no trace left on your computers. His will is yet to be fulfilled, child. There is no way to stop it, for he has said so.
She could feel the strange coldness, but didn't dare to look back at the camera for fear of letting this maniac out of her sight. The microphone was still whirring softly at least.
No chains shall bind me. No man shall block my way. This is his will, his command. I might be a sinner, but I am also a vessel.
Clarice concentrated on him again. There was a chill in the air now as the man started this strange sing-song. He was rocking back and forth, slowly at first, and Clarice couldn't help but take a step back. Her instincts told her to call for backup, but as she touched the button on her shoulder, nothing happened. The radio was silent, dead.
Remember, Clarice,
Your time is running out as well. For he shall command it soon, and I will do as he asks. Her hand touched her gun again, just as a strange sound filled the small room. It wasn't one she had ever heard before. This scraping, clicking, garbled noise ached in her ears. Clarice froze as she watched the hands of the man now reaching high up toward the ceiling. There was something going on with his handcuffs. The metal seemed to vibrate and shake. Rhythmically, they danced on his wrists, contracting and expanding ever so slightly. Until, suddenly, the man stood up and the cuffs crumbled down before their parts fell onto the floor. Clarice was by the door before she could even register what had just happened. One hand shot back to the button that would open the interrogation room, but all she could hear was the empty clicking of the mechanism, while her only way out stayed shut. Clarice hammered against the door as she saw the light above the table flickering as the dark eyes fell upon her once more. The only thing she could see in them now was this strange reverie, cruel and completely ecstatic. Behind the man, the chair toppled over and he started to move around the table. She could hear him stepping on the crumpled up parts of the handcuffs, and Clarice pulled her gun. It was trained on him in an instant as she screamed a command. He didn't react. Maybe he couldn't even hear her in his state. Clarice pulled the trigger. Again and again, and while the clicking sound filled her ears, no boom or bang echoed around the small room with the flickering lights. She was shaking, still uselessly hammering on the trigger as the man came closer and closer. He reached out and pushed the muzzle of her gun to the side. In his name, nothing is impossible. She heard the voice while his nose touched hers. Clarice wanted to scream, but the man put a hand over her mouth. Listen to his words. Look for his presence. The time, your time, is running out. His old dark eyes were staring straight through her, and she could smell his sour breath. But as she blinked, the whole world seemed to turn black. Clarice came to her senses, sitting on the ground, her back propped against the still shut door of the interrogation room. Only now, she was alone. All that was left of the man she had brought in here was the broken apart handcuffs still littering the floor behind the table. She shot up, even though her legs were rubbery and her body felt weak, and pressed the door release with her finger. The buzzing sound was followed by the entrance swinging open. Shit, Clarice mumbled. She could hardly stay upright, stumbled out into the hallway, and could see one of her colleagues looking over at her. A scream came out of him as she faltered again and crashed down onto the floor in what felt like the whole precinct was by her side in a matter of seconds. People were talking at her, to her, but Clarice couldn't concentrate on that. She needed to tell them. Father, he has the boy. He has the boy. William. Clarice felt hands lifting her up as people rushed past her and toward the empty interrogation room. They were screaming and shouting while she still felt her body shaking. Colleagues running off toward the cars and already radioing in for backup. They would find him, she told herself, and let her eyes fall shut. Clarice was lying in her bed, but she couldn't sleep. This whole day was one she just wanted to forget. After her collapse in the station, she was brought to a hospital, checked up and released. And now she was here, with only her own thoughts to keep her company. She had just gotten off the phone with one of her colleagues, and the news was dire. They had stormed a small building at the edge of the city, the one where they had picked up Father Kagan last time, but today it was empty. In their rush, they had almost missed the small door behind the makeshift altar, but once they had found it and broken it down, the smell that had hit them was unmistakable. Almost 24 dead bodies in varying states of decomposition were found. Among them was one of a 15-year-old boy. Clarice had to put the phone down after that spot of bad news. Somehow she had still clung to the hope that Father Kagan had just been lying, but the bodies found matched a long list of names he had rattled off. She felt sick to her stomach. What had really happened there, back in the interrogation room? Clarice could remember it clearly, but her mind still tried to make sense of it. Her phone rang, and she almost jumped out of bed before looking at the caller ID. Someone from the station. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. What else had gone wrong? With a sigh, she took the call and immediately heard someone breathing into the phone. Hey, Clarice? Hope I didn't wake you after... You know. This is Frida from the IT department. I went over the video and audio from the interrogation room camera, and there seems to be a problem. Some part of her had already expected as much, but the words still stung. Let me guess. Partway through it, the audio cuts off. She could hear the other person breathing again. Pretty much. Same as the video. It starts after he gets angry at you. There's this loud static that drowns out everything. And I do mean everything. And the video is not much better. You get flickers of the real feed here and there. But it's gonna be hard showing that to anyone. We're not even sure where to start to repair this. But it looks completely corrupted. So don't get your hopes up. Clarice rubbed the bridge of her nose as she started to feel really sick. Thanks for the info. Bye. Cutting the call short was the most logical thing she could do in her current condition. There had been no sign of the father in his church, nothing at all pointing to where he even was now. After disappearing from the interrogation room, he seemingly vanished. A strange, uneasy feeling was gripping her. Clarice couldn't stay in bed any longer. She felt tense, almost paranoid, and lying here like this only made the feeling worse. With a sigh, she jumped out of bed and stretched her muscles. There still was this rubbery feeling in her legs. Her back hurt and one of her shoulders was twitching lightly. Maybe she could go for a run to get her mind back in the game. She stepped closer to the window to look at the weather outside and stopped breathing. There was a figure standing on the street outside her house. She thought it was just some passerby, but it didn't move, and her mind already screamed at her that it was exactly what she was fearing the most. The bald head glimmered in the light of the street lamps. An old face, marred by the years, was turned toward her house. Dark eyes were looking straight at her through her window. "Your time is running out." She heard his voice in her head and suddenly felt as if she could smell his sour breath again. She could feel her whole body shaking as the figure down on the street started to move. He was coming, still staring up at her. He was here for her. Clarice screamed as the lights above her began to flicker.